But what we want to try and avoid relationship failing or fading. Um, the real difficult part of life, and it's not the case for everybody. Some people have a good run through life and get a good run with their relationships, but that's not the case for most, particularly these days with all the options and choices and dynamics that are going on between people these days, um, which is a shame, really. I'm going to change to the scenery, just see what we can get. So, what concerns me is when you get into a relationship, one of the things that you've got to be aware of is trying to find out, without being uh, paranoid or anything like that, what the background of the person that you're getting involved with is. Now, I think when you're doing that kind of thing, you need to start from with yourself, because it's easy to stand there and go, oh well, what's the background of this person that I'm about to get involved in? There's no there's no point of that if you don't know what the background of yourself is and how to deal with that. You've got to deal with that. You've got to get yourself right. So the best place to start before you start trying to work out somebody else, I suppose, is to work out yourself. I was brought into the world by a jockey. Uh, my father was a jockey and my mother was a hairdresser. And there were tensions with that. It didn't work. The jockey fell into womanizing. There was women um, all around the racetracks and that, and in the stables. And whilst he was in a relationship with my mother, he ventured into immoral behaviour, which had severe detrimental effects on my mum and caused her to leave him. Then the journey of our lives began after that. But we were broken at that point. Even as a young child, I was still broken as a result of that. So then you start to get your formative years. And all I saw in my formative years was, particularly 1 to 5, I suppose, or 0 to 5, was brokenness, a broken mother. And what I'm starting to realise is I'm a bit of a rescuer, because I didn't want my mother to be hurt. And when you're a child, you try and fill those gaps. You say to yourself, well, I can fix this. But for the most part, you can't. And this is what happens to children when they see their families break. They try and fill that void. But you can't. You can't do that. You can try. But what you're doing is you're psychologically putting on a responsibility. First, a responsibility on yourself, and secondly, a personality that's not yours. It's not your responsibility to try and fix these things. And so you end up losing your identity. Trying to rescue the parents from the life which has worked out for them. You try and fill the void, but you can't. And what happens is sometimes the parent will gravitate towards the child in a way in which they're trying to enable the child to fill that void. And that just contributes to the loss of the child's identity. Like there's another level, as it were, of loss of identity. And so it goes on and on and on and on. And then in that child's formative years, there's all sorts of psychological things that can take place. Now we've just walked down the street and we've come to this beautiful lake. There's some ducks there. The weather's been terrible here. Wow, look at this. There's been flooding and all the rest of it. So your formative years are vital. And my formative years were very dysfunctional. I spent most of my 1 to 5 years with my grandmother and grandfather. And that had a terrible impact on my life as well. By the time my mother turned up after the consequences of being involved with the jockey, my father, she got syphilis off him, apparently. She ended up in hospital for 18 months with a kidney failure. They had to take a kidney out. She was very, very ill. By the time she come back from hospital, I'll be honest with you, I didn't even know who my mother was. I didn't have a clue who she was. Now, where's that bird? There. I didn't have a clue. So now I'm finding myself in relationships at this stage in my life where I'm running into commitment problems with these. Well, would it be commitment problems? Not necessarily commitment problems, but problems where we're getting into infantile situations that ought not to exist. And it's not the partner themselves, it's usually their children. And you can't deal with other people's children. It's not your place for a start, nor should it be your place. And it's just too hard. It's just something you got to put in the too hard basket and go, that's not my problem. Well, that leaves the parent of the child in a very difficult position because they're trying to have a relationship with you. They've got conflicts with their children against you. They're harassing the mother for trying to build a relationship with well, for the most part, a stranger. And they don't stop. There's no relent. What this does is put tension on the woman, and then she finds herself between a rock and a hard place. Now, can you imagine trying to live a happy life with the children on your back on the one hand, the partner on the other side trying to navigate happiness for her and the attacks of her children, and the formative years of myself, I look at it and I go, why can't these people, these children, just leave her alone? Well, they're not going to, because they've got their own way of dealing with things, and they've got their relationship with their mother. And it takes a very strong woman to be able to realize what her needs are. Now, if you've got a woman that's had an upbringing, and this is where I'm leading to, if you've got a woman that's had a rough upbringing herself, say for instance a mother that tried to pedestalize her and make her into a Barbie doll, make her become the woman that she wasn't, and then you've got parents that have had a dysfunctional relationship and separated, and they've gone through all that, and then the father's one of these that's belted her when she's gotten to the point where he thinks she's gotten to the point she deserves to be punished physically, and then the mother's got another bloke and she's trying to work all that out, and then in the course of all this, her response to that's to become a drug addict, and then they get pregnant to one or two men, continue with their drug use or whatever, and you come along, and what makes you think you're going to be able to change that or fix that? They've got commitment issues, they want the man but don't want to commit. But the problem with it is you come along and all that's hidden at first. This is what men do to women as well. And you'll find these women getting involved in relationships with alcoholics, and all these types, and for some strange reason they don't seem to mind, because that's the life that they've been brought up in. The father could have been highly medicated, a pill addict. You don't know. You come into these people's lives, and the next thing you're trying to navigate that yourself, and you won't be able to, because it takes a therapist to fix these people. But what happens is these people become their own therapists and medicate themselves, however, or drug themselves. They become influenced by their infantile, immature children. They allow the children to have too much say in their life. The mother becomes a slave to the children by trying to give them back out of guilt what they've lost through dysfunctional relationships, the dysfunctional and sadness that she's had in her relationships. The children become her guardian, as it were, and you're trying to juggle all this. How in hell do you think that's going to work? The next thing, the children are attacking you, and you're having to withdraw because you're not up for it. Why should you be? Remember, they're her guardian, so she's listening to them. I mean, it just goes round and round and round and round. There's no formula. There's no one formula for relationships, because there's no one way in which people bond together, because everyone's different. So what you'll find is when it all starts to go bad, people start to withdraw. And that's the beginning of the end of a relationship, because not enough people really want to develop. And we default back to where we feel safe. And that's a place where the partner was not. And so what was supposed to be a relationship now is just a place of abandonment. And then you've got all these issues that come with that. It's not nice if you tell someone you don't want to be with them anymore. It's not nice if you are on the end of somebody saying, I don't want to be with you anymore. And it just seems to be, it's not the case for everybody, but if you're in these repeating situations, it can be a case where you've got to stop and work out whether the problem's inside yourself, because it's easy to point the finger at everybody else. Oh, sure, there's probably obviously things that could have been better in the other person, but I think the object at the end of the day is to make things better within yourself. And that's not easy, and it might take a therapist, it might take humility. You've got to find a way of helping yourself to be the best that you can be inside a relationship, so that the contribution to unresolved is minimal. Then you've got all the aspects, when you think about it, of commitment and loyalty and how people respond to conflict and all this stuff, all this stuff that can get you. You need to have a place where you can go to be rehabilitated, even in the relationship sometimes. But it's complex. There's no one way, and we all need to be aware of these things that can happen to us and that we can do to others as well. This is Dr. Jason W. Morrison, theologist, New South Wales, Australia. Bye for now.